wanting to touch a little bit just on the word evangelism itself, because it does seem to be
Mhm.
kind of not quite a taboo word, but it's got a bit of a bad taste in particularly in Western society, North American
Mhm.
society, for varying reasons. I'm wondering if you could share some of your own thoughts on why that might be the case, and then also how can we equip our churches to think differently about evangelism and equip them to embrace a lifestyle of evangelism.
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit, but I'll unpack it a bit more, is just to say that I think a couple things. One, especially people under the age of 50, let's say, who grew up with the hangover from other forms and styles that were really effective in their day. So having a track to share was really helpful in its day, to talk to someone on the street, talk to someone on a plane, talk to your neighbor, and to use a track. And I think it kind of turned off the next generation, Gen Xers like me and millennials, to say that doesn't feel natural and authentic. And therefore, I don't really appreciate it anymore. And I just want to say that those kind of tracks have been used for a very long time. They're very effective. Please don't see me saying they're bad. They have their place. But if you're looking at really engaging younger Christians and sharing their faith, they're just not motivated by that. They want to have authentic relationships where they get to know people. So I'd say that's one. There's some hangups about the previous ways of doing evangelism that really bother the next generation. The second thing I'd say is that a lot of evangelism has been talked about just as not going to hell. Right? It's just like, we want you to go to heaven. I remember there used to be evangelism questions like, if you were to die tonight, where would you go? And if you talk to a millennial, they're like, what was anyone thinking? Now, I know the heart behind it. It's a good heart behind it. Of course, we want to have everyone in heaven with us through a relationship with Jesus. Of course, of course. But what we missed out on is sharing what I'll call a holistic gospel, is that Jesus just didn't come to die for our future, but he came to die for our current life, that we may live as fully human as God the Father wants us to live. And that comes through being filled with the Holy Spirit and knowing Jesus and having relationship with the Father. And in that, when we just say it's only about heaven, then people are kind of thinking, well, that's just weird. And that's not, I want them to realize that actually following Jesus makes a difference for how we care for creation. It makes a difference for how we treat the poor. It makes a difference for how I am a neighbor in my community. It makes a difference for how I live today, not just for my eternal destiny. The third thing, sorry, Jen, I have lots. I think about these kind
Good.
of things a
Keep
lot. So
going.
I've got lots to say about it. I think the third thing that also people feel when they're thinking about evangelism is they're fearful. You know, we live in a society that what's good for you is good for you and good for me is good for me, but let's not try and force one another to think differently, which is happening all the time. We always are trying to persuade someone, whether it's the restaurant we love or whether it's a film we saw, whatever that might be. We're always trying to convince someone that we've experienced something wonderful, or we want them to believe what we believe. But somehow Christians have felt that's not acceptable in this time and day. And so they've been very nervous about it, and they don't want to alienate themselves from other people. And so there's fear and anxiety. And then lastly, there's not a lot of training anymore about evangelism. You know, how do I share my faith? Do I really have to go to an apologetics conference to be able to even just invite someone? And we've made it overcomplicated when it really can be a simple invitation. So those are some of the reasons that I think people have decided I'm opting out of evangelism. And that's why redefining it, and that's why I love Daryl Johnson's quote so much, is redefining it is really helpful for the next generation to think, hey, I can get involved in this.